Well, a recurring theme this episode seemed to be seemed to be honor, seemed to be seemed to be what is the right thing to do versus what is the smart thing to do. Now, now, sure enough, there were a lot of scenes that kind of reflected this, mainly in the way of character choice. And to be fair, they don't really hammer it in. They just kind of let you pick it up on your own. I mean, even now, as I'm kind of digesting the scenes, I'm still kind of I'm still kind of finding a place for this theme in each one of the scenes. So yeah, what can I say? I mean, it's Game of Thrones. I mean, you're basically guaranteed a good episode basically every week. I mean, you can't really say that about a lot of TV shows. I mean, usually they have at least one episode, or at least a few episodes that aren't exactly up to snuff, that are kind of lackluster. And it's not like Game of Thrones is a perfect show, not by any stretch of the imagination. It has its share of flaws, mainly in some of the characterization and how one-dimensional some of the characters are. But and I'm not talking about the main characters. I'm talking about all the side characters, which they seem to devote a lot of time to. But like I said, this is a very good episode. Not quite as the segues between scenes were not quite as smooth as they probably should have been. But again, it's difficult with this many stories going on at once. This many kind of micro stories going on that all add up to basically one big plot of who wants to be on the throne. Well, right now, Joffrey's much nicer, blander younger brother is on the throne. So we have yet to see what kind of king he will be. And do not spoil it for me, people who have read the books, please. I want to see how this plays out, and I am well aware that the show sometimes diverges from the books, but sometimes you have to do that. Believe me, I am no stranger to diverging from the books, or diverging from any kind of source material. Sometimes you have to do that to make it more fitting, for cinema, whether it be on the big screen or the small screen. So, so yeah, one of the more noteworthy plots this time around is Arya is still with the Hound, even though she has repeatedly stated that she wants to kill him, and he is repeatedly annoyed by her. I still like the very spiteful dynamic that is going on between those two, but at the same time, they acknowledge that yes, it is probably safer to stick together. um, Maybe at first Arya would have run away any chance she got, but then again, A, she wants to kill this guy, and B, she realizes now that yeah, after saving her life multiple times, I think she can probably figure out that yeah, I'm basically ensured safety with this guy, despite the fact that I really hate him. So the repertoire between those two was as strong as ever. It was still as cynical as ever. I really like the very cynical dialogue between them. But at the same time, they're kind of alike because they both really like killing. Granted, she's a lot younger than he is, and she doesn't have nearly the amount of experience that he does. But again, that can make for some potentially interesting scenes. One of which actually showed up in this episode, and it actually ties into the main theme of the whole episode, which was basically the scene is she's practicing her moves with her sword. I mean, she's practicing. I think she called it a water dance, which is a series of moves and strokes and thrusts that she learned from Sirio, her sword master from season 1. And the Hound goes up to her and is like, "What are you doing?" Um, because she is kind of dancing around and kind of striking these poses. It's very there is a lot of bravado in the style that she is practicing. And she says, I'm practicing the moves that were taught to me by the greatest swordmaster who ever lived, Sirio from Ravos, I think the place is called. So so his reply is, "You're never going to kill anyone like that." Um, he's like, "Come on, try me." And and he, and this is after she has told him that Sirio is most likely dead. She tries to stab him and she doesn't succeed, and he basically knocks her on the ground and he's like Sirio is dead. Doesn't matter. And she's like, but he was outnumbered, and he's like, doesn't matter. He's dead, and the person who killed him is still alive. So so it doesn't really matter how good you are with a sword. What matters is staying alive. That's basically the gist of what he's saying. So that really sums up how things work in this world. Is you either is a lot of the time you have the choice between fighting honorably or let me put it this way. You have a choice between fighting dishonorably or having an honorable death. Ned Stark chose the honorable death. Robb Stark failed to predict the dishonor of Filch from Harry Potter, and he got himself and his whole army killed in the process. I know that sounds harsh, but Robb Stark was a little too trusting, especially after he had already after he had already gone back on his deal with Filch from Harry Potter. Um, so again, this is yet another potentially useful lesson that Arya is learning from one of the most unlikely sources. I mean, she hates this guy, and yet she is learning so much about survival from him. Not because he wants to teach her, but because she is learning by example. She is learning by watching him. So yeah, I'm interested to see where their plot line goes. And what was also kind of creepy is that while I did say that Sansa may actually evolve as a character, this episode actually put her in an environment that is potentially more dangerous than the capital, because she's with her crazy aunt, and she is scheduled to marry her cousin, who last we saw was still suckling on his mom, and this kid is like, I don't know, 10 years old by this point. So, oh boy. So, yeah, it didn't really tie into the rest of the scenes all that much, or at least not on the surface. It didn't seem like, but yeah, I'm mildly intrigued by that little development, how Sansa's aunt is kind of jealous of her, and Littlefinger's infatuation with her. Not really the most interesting plot of the episode, but it's not dull. I still want to see where it goes. Another plot line that didn't really go anywhere narratively was Daenerys, the dragon chick. She's basically had a little setback because some of the cities, the slave cities that she has liberated, have revolted and are now back in slavery. And some of her guys are telling her, you should probably sail for Westeros and take your chances there. I mean, you don't have to keep wasting your time here. We have the ships, we have the resources, and there's a good chance that we might be able to take the capital and then go from there. We don't have an army big enough to conquer the whole land, but after conquering the capital, then we might actually get some allies. But she says, she basically, again, again, going for a more honorable route here, or maybe this is just for personal gain. Probably more so for personal gain, but it can be seen, at least in terms of, at least from the eyes of her peers, as honorable. In that she says, "No, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to liberate these cities. I'm going to rule as queen." So, because how can I possibly rule Westeros? How can anyone take me seriously if I can't even hold on to the cities that I've already conquered? So, so presumably she's going to go back and liberate those cities, or at least have some choice words with the conquerors or the revolters of said cities. So, like I said, on paper it seems like, or at least, initially, it seems like, at first glance, you might guess, oh, she has a good heart. She's not going to leave these slaves, but you do get this kind of undertone, and this can be attributed to a deterioration of her moral compass in the harsh environments that she's had to adapt to. You kind of get the second impression that, you know, a lot of this may be for purely strategic purposes. I mean, like she said, she is doing this partially to demonstrate that yes, she can hold on to lands that she is currently ruling. So, again, her invasion of Westeros is being put off, but again, I'm interested to see where it will go. Her scene was basically a decision-making scene. It wasn't nearly as eventful as when she took one of these slave cities, but can't win them all, right? What else? The most eventful part of the episode was actually dealing with Jon Snow, which, at this point, in my opinion, is probably the most likable character in the show. Because he's one of the only ones with any sense of honor, with any semblance of a moral compass anymore. I mean, he's one of the only good, pure characters on the show. I mean, yeah, he's made mistakes, but he regrets them. He truly regrets them, and he really wants to do what he feels is right for himself, his friends, and the whole land. So he's one of the most noble characters on the show, and he kills the mutineers. Now again, this kind of goes back to the central theme where when he's fighting the leader of the mutiny, Burn Gorman. I believe it's Burn Gorman playing him. I could be mistaken, but he's fighting Burn Gorman, and as he is fighting, it's basically evenly matched until Burn Gorman starts playing dirty. I mean, he spits in his face, and he's like, you know the problem with honor, John, and he resorts to some cheap tactics and has Jon Snow on the ground. And the only reason that he's not able to kill Jon Snow right then and there is because he is stabbed in the back by one of the people who his men were sexually assaulting. I don't know their names, I'm sorry. But then Jon stabs him in the mouth, and I'm like, yes. Another satisfying death came right on the heels of that one, actually, when the guy who chopped off Jaime Lannister's hand tries to hightail it out of there with Bran Stark in tow as a political hostage for his daddy. So, what happens? Well, Bran uses the warg thing to take control of Hodor, his bodyguard / assistant, and Hodor, with Bran controlling him, basically picks the guy up and kills him. So that was a pretty awesome scene, and they axed off yet another character that I didn't like, that I wanted to see die. It seems like that's a recurring aspect of this season. They're killing off the characters who we didn't like, because Joffrey, there was the guy who stole Arya's sword. There was the guy. Now there's the guy who chopped off Jaime Lannister's hands. There was the evil Mo Howard-looking Burn Gorman guy, who took over the outpost, the village. So I did think it was a pretty selfish move on Bran's part, and it was selfish, and it didn't really make a whole lot of sense strategically. I know I'm going to get people who have read the book saying, well, he has to do this. He has to harness this warg power. He can't, because if he goes with Jon Snow, he will make him stay at Castle Black. Yes, but why not at least tell him or show him that you are alive? Why not at least talk to him? Because Bran Stark leaves the village that Jon Snow is currently attacking without even a word to Jon. Supposedly to meet the three-eyed raven that he's been having dreams about for basically the whole series. I'm sorry, but I would like to think that Bran Stark, being a Stark, a member of one of the most likable families in the land, would have a bit more of an obligation to his family rather than a few visions. And I know the visions are not just visions or are not just dreams, they're important. But A, they're not very interesting in comparison to a lot of other plot lines. And B, it really kind of diminishes the human side of Bran, or lack thereof at this point. So that I'm not gonna lie, I had a problem with. I mean, Bran did kill the guy who chopped off Jaime Lannister's hand, and I applaud him for that. But I don't know, I still think that was kind of a selfish and strategically stupid action. But on the upside, we did actually get to see a softer side to Lena Headey's character. It wasn't very credible because I don't know what it is about Lena Headey. I mean, maybe it's because she looks like a very hard person, like a very harsh-looking, evil person. But I don't know. Whenever they try to bring her character sympathy on the show, it never really resonates with me emotionally. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that they seem so preoccupied, or not preoccupied. Maybe it seems like they take so much joy in showing how evil and sadistic her character is that a lot of the time they forget to show that she is an actual person, that she has more emotions than just, oh, I'm evil. They seem to be trying to make up for that in this episode by A, her talking to Marjorie, Natalie Dormer, and B, her talking to Prince Oberyn, and basically saying, could you tell my daughter who is currently in your land, could you tell her that I miss her, blah 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 blah. Coming to Prince Oberyn like that, it doesn't really make, well, I see where she was coming from, especially since he hasn't really shown any outward signs of hostility towards her so far. I mean, yeah, he was kind of nasty to her at the party, but again, as a mother, it made sense. But the thing is, like I said, it's, for whatever reason, the quote unquote heartfelt scenes with Lena Headey just did not resonate with me emotionally, or at least not in the way that I think they were intending. But with that said, it was still a very good scene, and it did. I mean, they may not resonate with me emotionally, but showing these more emotional scenes with Lena Headey does actually lend some dimension to her character. So I have to give them that, and it's nice that they didn't completely forget about her daughter. And again, once again, going back to the theme of honor that was going around in this episode, maybe I'm thinking too deep into it. Maybe I'm just kind of repeating myself, but going back to that central theme, there is a nice little moment with Prince Oberyn saying, in Dorne, I think he's from, we don't hurt little girls, and him basically accepting the request to tell Lena Headey's daughter that she misses her. So just that little bit of sympathy, or seeming, just that little bit of sympathy, or at least it seemed like sympathy, is actually starting to make his character more of a character rather than just a vengeance-driven guy. So to see that he supposedly that he supposedly draws the line somewhere in terms of exacting his vengeance on all Lannisters. I mean, at least he has some sort of moral code, or again, that's what it seems like. He could be lying, but again, I just like that little moment. It seemed like a very human moment, especially for these two characters who have somewhat of a shortage of those kinds of moments. But anyway, good episode, great acting, great sets. The action scenes were a little foggy. I mean, I get what they were going for with it being, with them being in the middle of a tundra, basically. But I think they could have done something to convey that without necessarily making it too difficult to see. And I understand it was a very difficult action. It can potentially be a very difficult action scene to shoot. I mean, it's dark, so there's that disadvantage, and it's in the snow, so there's that disadvantage. And with those disadvantages taken into account, they still did a pretty good job. I just wish it had been a little clearer. But the fight between Jon Snow and Burn Gorman was pretty cool, and it ended in a very satisfying way. So, yeah, I was happy with this episode. Not exactly one of their best, but again, their best is a pretty high bar. So like always, I'm interested to see what's going to happen next week. Oh, and especially with Brienne and Pod, because they actually had some. There was actually a nice introduction to the type of relationship that they might have. So, again, looking forward to a lot of payoff that this show is continually promising, and a lot of building of different relationships that this show is also promising. I mean, it's like they want to cover as many bases as possible with having different characters interact. And for the most part, they're doing a good job of weaving all that together with a relatively significant amount of panache. So, if I had one problem with this episode, is that there was a serious lack of Peter Dinklage and Nikolai Coster-Waldau. They needed them in this episode somewhere. I'm sorry, they did. That's about all I got, and I will talk to you later.